Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler, the guy who tries to put the pieces together. I'm in a position to have an opinion about the condition of our countrymen. Uh, for one thing, I've lived out in what is essentially Trump country more than 2 to 1 uh, for over 25 years in Trump country. I got to watch them change from the conservative America that they had been. That was really had a lot of good qualities to it. Uh, the Republican base in rural America during the time of Reagan, I got to watch how they have become what they are now. And what they are now is, I think, could be shown with good definitions and plenty of evidence and logical sense in the cause and effect. Uh, these are people who are in their political lives crazy and evil. Meaning, with evil, I really want to revise that to say they are supporting something which would be reasonable to call evil. And I define evil, and I really think this is the best definition for working with the idea, is a coherent force that consistently works to make things more broken in the human world or make things worse. By that definition, what tens of millions of our countrymen are supporting requires them to be crazy and has them supporting essentially a coherent force that consistently works to make things more broken. I mean, make a list of all the things that Trump has done since he was elected last November, and just consider all the damage that he has done. He has left and right, intimidating law firms and getting Columbia University to kowtow to him in violation of their First Amendment rights and all kinds of stuff. And yet, tens of millions of our countrymen are still supporting this. They elected it and they're supporting it. And they believe a whole lot of things that aren't true. And that can be said to be the essence of craziness in the sense of psychosis, hallucinations and hearing voices. And, it's just crazy to believe a lot of things that the Trump base overwhelmingly believes, like that the election was stolen in 2020. I mean, you're really not operating very well. You're not really saying when you're thinking about, well, was the election stolen or was it Donald Trump who was trying to steal it? If you don't know that, you are not connected with reality, and that goes pretty much up and down. So that's craziness. And then you look at all the things that are being done to America by the force that they are choosing to support. Even after he abandons Ukraine, even after he lies about immigrants eating people's pets, continues to lie about that well after it has obviously been established as a false rumor that arose in this fashion, but there's no truth to it. Even after that, he does that. This is a guy who is just wantonly acting in a way that is damaging to the world, making people suffer, ending all the good things that we might do, like through USAID. I mean, if it's good, these people will go after it. If there are people in the Justice Department who have some integrity, they're finished. It's just so consistent, a coherent force that consistently works to make things more broken. And I've watched as things keep on happening for the last 10 years, from the Access Hollywood tapes to the impeachment trials to rousing an insurrection, all this stuff that was shown that is really up and down the line a way of making America worse, moving things in the wrong direction, trampling on the values that have been at the heart of America from our founding years with the Constitution, in favor of something which is simply about letting a guy like that compel everybody to follow his will. A man who is as broken, as flagrantly in as many dimensions as anybody I've ever seen. And I've written extensively about some human monsters like Hitler and Stalin. This is a human monster. And one of the great things about it is he does not hide it. He doesn't come out pious sounding like Richard Nixon while being a thug underneath. He's a thug all the way. And tens of millions of our countrymen somehow are seeing whatever it is they see. And I keep on trying to figure out, well, is it they don't know it? That somehow they're crazy and they can't see what's right in front of their face? Or is they know it, but they are actually in favor of the force of evil rampaging around America, destroying our reputation in the world, imposing tariffs, antagonizing our neighbors who've been as close to us as anybody, and the Canadians, so that they boo the Star-Spangled Banner at sports events. I mean, up and down the line. Climate change, stop trying to solve a problem of great urgency. Up and down the line, a coherent force that consistently works to make things more broken. And these people have all this displayed in front of them. And then the polls say that he still has the approval of, 46%, 47%, down for the 49.9% that he got on election day. But not down all that far. And he's just, he's been a national catastrophe from day one, a wrecking ball. And Elon Musk and that corruption and his chainsaw. I mean, who would have thought that you would ever see anything like this? But then who would have thought that people of conservative America could witness this and still be among the 46 or 47%? So does that mean we got to give up on these people? Have they gotten into some incurable position? It sure doesn't seem like a very ideal future to have a lot of crazy people who are drawn to support evil in our body politic. Enough to right now perhaps have given the force of fascism the power to destroy American democracy and replace the America we've known with an America that's got a lot of dark things that we've always celebrated that we don't have. You know, this isn't Putin's Russia. We don't have the political opponents being actually murdered and poisoned. Navalny and his dying in prison, and that other fellow who was a threat to Putin being assassinated on that bridge in Moscow. That's not the America that we grew up in. How is it that these people are becoming that America? I write a weekly op-ed that goes in the newspapers in two of the main markets in the in the congressional district where I was the Democratic nominee for Congress in 2012, which is another way I have of, besides living among them and doing talk radio for a decade with these people, I also ran as a candidate. And I found out back in 2012 that conservative America had become very, very closed, like there was a thick shell around it that you couldn't penetrate. I wrote a piece after I lost quite predictably to the 20-year Republican incumbent called The Uncrackable Nut. So that's like 13 years ago that I experienced how difficult it was. I didn't expect to win when I decided to run. But I did expect that I would be able to engage with the Republican base in some meaningful way and call them back to the better angels of their nature. And I was not able. I was not able to reach them. I mean, it wasn't that I had a dialogue that I had anticipated with the presentations to various groups and having a real conversation, but there was a closedness. First of all, people would not come to a Democrats event. People were, one group was just astonished because they assumed that their neighbors from church would come to the event that they were holding for me. But it was more like when they found out that there was a Democrat going to speak, it was like, Satan, get thee hence. So this has been a while coming. So I don't know how one reaches them. I put out my messages in these weekly op-eds. I feel good about them. I mean, I would love to have them, the best of them, gathered together into an anthology because it's some of my best work. I take it very seriously, and occasionally I swing for a home run, and I get it. That's how I feel about it. But I don't have any sense that I'm having an impact on them. There may be other ways of doing it that would have an impact, but I don't see people asking that question. Maybe it'll also just take time. I'd hate to think that we got to wait for all these people to die out before America can be politically healthy again. On the one hand, I have tried a lot of things that don't obviously have an impact on bringing them back to their right minds. But to resign ourselves to these people being crazy and evil supporting seems like giving up on way too much when we don't really know what could be accomplished if we put our minds to it. So, yeah, these people are really in a dark place. It's not obvious how to summon them back, but it's also necessary. There are a lot of otherwise good people. If you engage with them, you feel like there is a goodness that you're engaging with. And when I moved out here in 1992, I felt that there was a lot of that. It had a different flavor from the kind of goodness that I experienced living in a liberal kind of society some years inside the Washington Beltway. But having its own beauty. some beauties that were not present in the goodness of liberal America. And in their political lives right now, they are in the possession of something that got built up over a considerable period of time. They went from a sane collective political mind in the 1980s, say, to the insane political world that we see now. Ronald Reagan channeled some of the brokenness that is in conservative America, even when it's basically healthy. But he also, and perhaps predominantly, put out a benign energy into America, which reflected a lot of the virtues that I encountered when I moved out here. There are some ways in which living in this kind of rural, traditional culture, where people are used to, the culture has evolved in a situation where you know you're going to have to deal with whoever it is again and again for the rest of your life. So you maintain decent relations in a way that, say, inside a big major city, there is not that commitment to making the human world work well. There are virtues there. And in their political lives, they got led out of those virtues and into this place. I believe that part of the problem is that liberal America does not even try still to reach out to them, to move them. There's not much effort. Like my weekly op-ed pieces, I don't know another liberal voice. I'm a small voice, but I'm a regular public voice. I don't know another liberal voice that has taken on the job of talking to the conservative, Trumpy, crazy, evil support. I'm continually trying to show these people that what they're supporting is the opposite of the values that they expressed to me on a talk radio in the 90s that I felt was really admirable. Christian values, people who really lived a good Christian life. I mean, you could tell from the way they talked about the issues that we were discussing that these are people you would want to have in your community. It's an interesting question, psychologically, psychohistorically, and whatever. What was the process by which these people got brought from dwelling in mostly goodness, the mixture that we humans have, but plenty of the conservative America were living lives that were suffused with a good deal more goodness than brokenness. And then the process was unleashed by the fascist force that managed to move them in their political lives into this crazy and evil place. And what's interesting to note that I can testify to, because I live out here, is that goodness is still there and it's visible in the rest of the lives that they live. To have, I mean, there's also signs of some kinds of social pathologies, but I know conservative people who have some wonderful human qualities, and we can get together with the rule that we're not going to talk politics. Because the goodwill that we can easily get together in when we're dealing with them outside the political realm, it would be difficult to maintain when we bring in the political realm, because we're dealing with good versus evil. I have a a specific, intense, and somewhat wrenching story to tell, a specific case of the problem and of some of the emotional component of it that make it very difficult for us to work together in the political realm. I have had a friend who we had met online where my pieces, my op-eds would run. He would come out and engage with me sometimes, coming to me from the Republican side. And more than anybody I dealt with for a very long time, this guy was able to be civil and to make actually substantive points. I mean, for years, the only thing you would get from the right would be snide, you know, basically unwilling or unable to deal with any legitimate substantive questions, but just coming in with insults and name calling and stuff like that. So this guy came in, he was engaging with me, and we eventually developed a relationship where we also could email each other privately. And for a little while, he and I became friends. I don't want to go into too much detail, but we actually ended up with three couples, my wife and me, and two sets of Republican married people, two men, two women, and some real friendships between April and one of the Republican women, between me and this Republican man, and he had some intelligence. And I also felt like I was engaging with him, and he indicated that I was somehow bringing him around for a while. And then I heard, and he was definitely not for Trump. And then I heard that he was flying a Trump flag on his property. And suffice it to say, I felt very disturbed. And the feelings that I was having of friendship were not there. And I dealt with him some through email about it, but I found that his way of understanding things was so skewed in some way. I mean, I started to wonder, is there anything that, say, Trump could do? I mean, he ended up voting for Trump. And I wrote a piece saying this is a catastrophe of historical proportions immediately after. And he simply doesn't see that. And he and I continue now to have public engagements. My pieces come out elaborating on, take a look at this. This is not what a good person would want to. Anyway, I make my arguments one way and another, week after week, and then he comes in, and he just says stuff that I wonder why doesn't he see what he doesn't see? I mean, for example, just this week, I had a piece in there about the soul of a great nation and how the Republicans are destroying the soul of the nation, turning it to something dark, and that the Republicans in Congress are selling their souls to a force that is turning the American soul from something that we could legitimately be proud of into something that causes us a shame and not a little bit of fear. He said that, yeah, he doesn't like everything about Trump, but given the Hobson's choice, now I think if I remember, Hobson's choice means you got to choose between bad and worse or something like that. And and he mentioned something about extreme policies on the Democratic side. So I write back and I say, Hobson's choice. What you voted for was so obviously so much the opposite of anybody one should give the powers of the presidency to, that we would certainly be better off if we just took the luck of the draw a name out of any telephone book and gave them the powers of the presidency for 4 years. They wouldn't do as much damage as he's already doing. Extreme views? Are you aware that I mean, there are some of things which I conceded, I didn't go into it depth, that I think that liberal America doesn't have right, that it is too extreme in some directions. In my view, the issue of trans, while important because human beings are involved, in the big picture is a really pretty small thing and shouldn't wag the dog. The larger thing is we're fighting a battle between democracy and fascism. We're fighting a battle between good and evil, and you got to pick your battles if you want to win the war. But extreme? Are you aware, I asked him, that almost all the policy positions that the Democrats take are often to the are held and supported by the conservative parties of other decent, affluent, free societies, like in Europe and Australia and Canada. You know, the American, Obamacare is a much more conservative way of dealing with a legitimate issue that America had to deal with, compared with what almost all the other peer nations do. There was nothing extreme about it. On the opposite, there's very little that by judging from the world's standards, is extreme about the Democratic Party. But he, an intelligent and educated man, has a picture of the world in which the Democratic policies are extreme. I don't think Obama or Biden were characterologically capable of going to an extreme. The deep reasonableness, the desire to get along and to bring the country with you was so strong. I mean, I would have had Obama go for the public option in that. Apparently, it was believed that you couldn't get that through Congress. I don't know. I would have gone for it, I think, because, well, it seemed like in order to approach the pathologies in American healthcare system, which had us wasting $1 trillion or more every year and losing maybe 50,000 additional lives every year, paying twice as much for getting something worse than everybody else. I thought we should go for, go for something better than a single. But Obamacare was going for a single, and it was an important hit to get. I celebrate that accomplishment. But the people in the Republican base thought that this was some kind of terrible government overreach. One could see them on every issue believing the incredible. And here's this educated guy. I could show him this, I could show him that. I'd write fairly long replies to his comments online, and I can tell he is trapped inside of something. He's such a fine man. I don't know how it is that he's relating to the evil dimension here. But there's something happening that I don't quite understand in his, because I know him to be intelligent and to be well educated. He retired at a high rank from a career in the Navy. He's attended war colleges and he's written things. He also writes pieces in the newspaper. Not a powerhouse, but you would expect that when we're dealing with something as simple as showing the utter ugliness, brokenness, destructiveness of what he's supporting. The picture, if you didn't get it before from all the rest of it, the picture of all the things that Trump has done in the last 100 days, if that isn't the clearest evidence of catastrophe, how would you create a picture? I mean, maybe he could have declared war and attacked somebody rather than just threatened the Canadians and threatened to seize Greenland and have people around him who threatened to invade Mexico. Do we give up on people like this? On the one hand, we are led to believe that this is a tough nut to crack. Well, let's at least ask, how can this nut be cracked? The fact that this guy is such a splendid person to deal with, person to person outside of politics, tells you that there is within his structure, there is this spirit of goodness, of friendliness, of compassion. One of my cats really took to him in a way I've never seen him take to any stranger. So is there a way to bring that part of him into the political realm? And I don't know that this guy is typical of what else is going out there with people who maybe aren't somewhat educated. But how do we reach them? At least let's ask the question and try a bunch of things. Because on the other hand, it may well be the case that this is hopeless. It's not the kind of thing we can just give up on. This thing that got achieved in the Trump supporting base over the course of decades, from the rise of Limbaugh in the early 90s all the way to now. This thing didn't happen overnight. And liberal America was complicit by standing on the sidelines while these people, without even fighting over their hearts and minds. And now we've gotten to this point where even by 2012, it was not the same Republican base that I had those telephone radio conversations with in the 1990s. They had been led first by W, with Bush's brain being that sociopath Karl Rove that cultivated the worst in the Trump base, and then onward all the way to Trump. It happened over time. And the goodness is still there. And the nation needs to have the kind of sane and decent people that they once were for our democracy to flourish. So yeah, we got to bring down this Trump force, got to defeat them in whatever ways we can, in the courts, in the elections. But we also got to, if we want to have a healthy America, we not only need to drain power from this fascist force as best we can, but in order to do that, we also need to reach out to the good and decent people that they also are, and get them to bring their goodness and their decency to bear on their politics. Stop supporting this ugly thing, this Trumpian fascism, and align themselves with the conservative values that conservatives used to celebrate in their 4th of July speeches. Things like the rule of law, like a well-ordered society, like people playing by the rules, like people having good character, which meant that you could rely on them to apply the right principles in their dealings in the world. People of a character where they have taken on, as the conservative Americans of this region would have said 50 years ago, the spirit of the New Testament and the teachings of do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and even striving for love thy neighbor and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. A spirit that was supposed to be another part of the good character of the good human being that the conservatives celebrated having. And now they're aligned, supporting the most. I don't talk about evil as in evil people, but there has not been in American history a more powerful ally to the force of evil than Donald Trump. If there were an anti-Rushmore, he would be far and away the lead candidate for most destructive presidents ever to have had power in this country. If we reach out to these people as best we can, striving to understand where they are and how that might be dealt with, what else can we do? I have a sense of futility about what I do with this audience. I get some sustenance that I need for, a little bit of applause from the liberal minority out here in the Shenandoah Valley. That's gratifying enough to keep me going. But it's the other group that I really walk around with in my mind. I can't stop caring about them. So in addition to the fact that we need to move them, even if we don't know we can, there's the fact that I have had a bond and a relationship with them myself that was important to my heart. It was the first time in my life that I felt like I was really a meaningful member of a human community, and was having something of an impact. The impact being to create a kind of discourse that I believed in, which is the opposite of the kind of discourse that Rush Limbaugh was fomenting. This was a place, and these were people that I walked around with a feeling that is not been part of my life much of the time, of having a loving relationship with people. Just at a certain level, just, a guy on the talk radio, talking on the phone, discussing questions of meaning and value that we face in our lives, and getting acquainted with each other by trying together to create something good. I had the experience of what it was like to work with these people to create something good. And my wife and this other Republican woman, they had formed a really wonderful friendship, never talking about politics, but both of them serving on the electoral board. Both of these women, very capable, very well organized, very well intentioned and principled women who get the job done, work together and enjoyed each other in so many ways. So there's a part of my heart also that wants to bring them back. It is painful. It is painful for me to see this guy that I had considered a friend. I don't feel like a friend anymore. The fact that he can't, his way of understanding and relating and acting in the world, I can't have any respect for. If you can't see that Donald Trump is the opposite of that anything would be better than Donald Trump, if you can't see that, who are you? What are you? So we will be having a gathering of the three couples soon. And I first felt very uncomfortable about the idea of being together with this guy who I had felt as a friend, but whose conduct has so deeply disturbed me that I do not feel the friendship that I had felt. But I'm now feeling like I can pull it off, that I really do feel some kind of human regard for the guy. And I don't understand him, and I don't understand how somebody with his intelligence could. I mean, I've been dealing with a variety of things. This is just a tip of the iceberg with this guy. He just won't see it. And that alienates me because we're involved in the most significant battle. Well, it may be in history in a way, but whether the United States is going to be on this side or that side of the great battle between, say, democracy and fascism, and between responding to climate change responsibly and recklessly endangering our children and grandchildren, all these dichotomies, this is a battle between all those things, the rule of law and tyranny. All those things are on the line. And it's very hard for me to feel open-hearted towards somebody who's on the other side. But I think that that's also part of the challenge that we face as democratic or pro-democracy America. How do we approach these people so that to have some kind of positive impact on how crazy they are and how aligned with evil they are? If we don't ask the question, we won't come up with the answer. And they only got this way because our side of the battle didn't see the threat rising, didn't fight this thing as it was rising, this very anti-democratic, plutocratic, fascistic, dishonest, unprincipled, completely sociopathic party has been emerging for 30-some years. And liberal America failed to fight the takeover by the party. So let's fight at all the levels, not just in the courts, not just in the elections, but for the hearts and minds of the conservatives, and to pound the Republican Party for having sold its soul. Make them buy their soul back by calling attention to what they're supporting and how they're supposed, and how we know that they know better. Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, they should be shamed for that. This is a multi-front battle. We lost it at many levels over the years, and we got to fight it at many levels from here on out if we're going to resume aligning this country with the constructive forces and not the forces that make things more broken. Thank you for listening. My website is abetterhumanstory.org, and you'll find there an integrated picture of our situation as a species and as Americans, all integrated that together. As much as I've been able to put together on a labor of love that began essentially in 1970 and has been pretty much full-time ever since. And I'm a guy who's trained in formulating decent explanatory networks. So here's a picture which shows why human history has been the way it has, and how we can conclude that this is not a reflection on human nature, that things have been as ugly as they have. All the way up to what has happened to us human beings because of the force that we unleashed when we became the first species on this planet to start inventing its own way of life. And that did unleash a great force. In that book back there, The Parable of the Tribes, The Problem of Power in Social Evolution, explains that there has been a force that our unprecedented step brought into the world, an unprecedented force, a destructive force that we're still contending with, and that Trump and these fascist Republicans are a particular manifestation of an ancient problem, of a coherent force that consistently works to make things more broken. So I've been working on putting that thing together. If you go to abetterhumanstory.org, you'll find that laid out simply and quickly to complexly and from a variety of different directions. If having a picture that makes a lot of sense, that puts some important things in an importantly different light, like how we're to think of ourselves as creatures, how we to think of the challenges that we face, and what do we have to achieve for this human civilization to survive on this planet for the long haul, rather than destroy ourselves, which we are seriously in jeopardy of doing. If you would be interested in seeing such a picture, if one were actually available, you'll find a variety of ways to whatever depth you want to go. I take infinite delight in seeing the richness and coherence and meaningfulness of all that's going on in the human world. A great many mysteries, like, how did they accomplish turning these intelligent people into people who believe things that are obviously wrong? I feel mystified by it, but despite all these pockets of questions that remain, I do think that there's an important explanatory framework to be offered there, and I hope that if you'd like to get it, you'll actually will check it out. And I'm going to put together a series of pieces called What Does It Take to Get a Healthy America Back? Or maybe how did America come to this? And I think I think that's what I'll do. Maybe it's a two-sided thing. How did America come to this? What's happened to us is not just a function of the political realm. The political realm is an arena in which a whole lot of things got played out. The whole of American civilization is such a complex web of things, and from what's happening in corporate America from the 1950s to the 2020s to what happened to the family structure from the 1950s to the 2000s to the first decade of the new millennium. There's just so many things, and new technologies, so there's just a lot of stuff that collide in creating a situation like we find ourselves in that would have been unthinkable. To have a Republican base like this and have a man like Donald Trump sitting in the White House, and a Republican Party that is so under his thumb that whatever he says goes, even when it's crazy, like Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, and not minding the corruption of Pam Bondi, the election denier, because they were election deniers too, like complete lack of principle. We need a battle at the political level. We need to deal with our understanding of the world so that we are able to see what's going on and to understand some of the interactions that, for example, some liberal policies maybe helped create the huge leap in the proportion of births that were out of wedlock. I don't really know what the consequences of that were, but I've seen the statistics, and the it varied from one race to another, but in both Black America and White America, the number of births out of wedlock increased hugely over a fairly brief period of time, and it may have been a function of what the Republicans complained was the culture of dependency. There was a time when a lot of children were being brought up in circumstances that, well, I don't know how that compares with how good or bad the circumstances were, but it does seem quite possible to me, based on limited knowledge, that if you've got, say, instead of 5%, I don't know about these numbers, but you go to like 40% of births are out of wedlock, you are going to have a lot of people who grow up with certain kind of structural defects, perhaps, that wouldn't have been present in a society where the great majority, 95%, are growing up in a situation where there is a marriage, a father and a mother. I don't know how important those are. The conservative used to bring them up, and maybe they were right. That's what I figure. Because I've been talking to people and getting an unusual number of stories about out here in Trump land, anyway. Up families. A lot of things that are contrary to what I grew up expecting a normal family would have. A lot more families in which there's uh, breakdown, maybe abuse, um, a lack of some significant thing that a child needs growing up. And people nonetheless grow up, and then they become what? I mean, I'm conjecturing that if you've got a lot of people who are growing up with a certain structure, maybe there's a connection between that structure or that lack of structure and the capacity to be seduced by a right-wing force like this. There's a woman that we know who suffered terrible abuse as a girl growing up in her family. And when asked, why do you support Donald Trump? She said, because he protects us from the bullies. Given her history, given that Trump is far and away the most bullying person I think that we've ever seen, certainly in my lifetime, but I would be surprised that there's been a more bullying person on the American stage since the 18th century, or what I mean is ever. And she sees him as that kind of her protector from bullies. There's something really pretty twisted about that, and so I am imagining that the abuse that she suffered led to her adapting to it in a kind of crazy way. That there's some part of her that's just kind of broken when it comes to how to relate to an abusive and tyrannical power. She was at the mercy of something before, some kind of tyrannizing and terrorizing over her as a child, and then she adopts this guy who's really trying to terrorize the whole country into submission. So if you got brokenness coming up in the family structure, maybe that connects at some point with brokenness getting expressed in the political arena. with the ability of a guy like Donald Trump to hook into somebody like her. I keep on thinking that Donald Trump, as crazy as he is, as pathological, malignant narcissist as he is, also has a kind of genius. I think he understands something about people. Either that or he's simply lucked into, just the card he had to play with, or the key that he had unlocked the locks of the people. But he seems to have been able to get into people like this who had suffered such terrible abuse. And somehow my friend who served in the Navy and and got into a place where somehow he could go from where he was. And he's a guy who writes all the time about some great American values. He's a real patriot in all the traditional conservative ways. He salutes everything and celebrates our American heroes and is always romanticizing. And then in his politics, he supports all the things that the people that he celebrates would have loathed. He and I have shared how we both think highly of George Marshall, FDR and Truman's guy, a wonderful human being and a conservative. But doesn't he see that George Marshall would loathe what Trump is doing to the American nation? Trump has found a way around people's strengths. He's found a way to hone in on people's weaknesses, whatever they are. I'm conjecturing about the woman who's abused. I got no idea about my friend. It just disturbs me by blowing my mind that intelligence isn't worth more than that, and that this guy cannot be led to see the plainest thing that we've ever seen on the American stage, which is the utter destructiveness of this man. He is a destroyer. How can you not see it? So disturbing. Get broken. Brokenness works with brokenness. So the Trump's sociopathy combines with his genius to make a unique figure in American history. A guy who could find the key to the locks of tens of millions of people and get them completely plugged in on their worst elements when they act and think and perceive in the political realm. It's almost as though they're in a hypnotic state in the political realm, where as neighbors and as business people and as churchgoers, they are one kind of human being, but in this realm, their other side gets to run the show because Donald Trump unlocked the lock in which the beast resided. We're dealing here not just with politics, we're dealing with the spiritual realm. And we face a spiritual challenge. And I'd like to see the voices of liberal America rise to this spiritual challenge and get people to experience what's at stake here in a way that taps into their passions for what's right and what's good, and what's life-serving. Thank you. Andy Schmuckler, abetterhumanstory.org. I've enjoyed riffing on all this with you. The world that we're living in, as scary as it is also an extraordinarily rich drama that rewards close examination, and that we're more likely to win if we understand what it is that's fighting, what the battlefield looks like, and how what we're up against tells us something about how we have to fight it. Thank you. Bye-bye.